Welcome back to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. Beginning, intermediate, advanced, what kind of guitar player am I? Well, today we're going to find out. Stay tuned.
So stage left is I'm gonna go with Mike Portnoy from the audience's perspective.
From the audience's Interesting, because I always took it from the performer's perspective.
Yeah, I mean it seems like if you're on stage, your left would be stage left. That would make more sense to me. But I guessing it's from the audience's perspective. You know, whatever the stage manager or whoever the front of house guy is tells me to go, I'll just go that direction. I'll take the word for it usually.
So it's ambiguous.
Yes, exactly. Identify as stage right. You know
I think, whoever's running front of sound, right, the stage manager.
Whoever is going to be the one that tells you, you just go ahead and listen. So it's like, no, idiot, the other way. Like, okay, yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Right.
That's how you see this. It reminds me, it's so funny, like, I remember when I was in music school, I'd be told by some of my live performance workshop teachers, like, you know, this is how it's always done. This is how it's always done. And then you get in bands and you realize that there's no one way everything's always done. It's always different.
This is not how it's always done.
Different every time. So basically what you're telling me is it's what you do. But there's no like, what am I trying to say? There's no reason that that's the way it is. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's kind of just me complaining at the end of the day.
No, that's okay. Yeah. And I like how, I hope you appreciate how I had us in Superman villain voice.
Dude, that's the way I thought I always sounded. Don't I always sound like that all the time?
You shall be crushed beneath my feet.
That was V, the TV miniseries lizard alien voice. There's a deep cut. Remember how the voice is all modulated?
I don't know why I like that so much, because there really almost nothing happens the whole time. It's almost like a slow episode of like Magnum PI or something, and then like the end, they're aliens. You know, that's kind of. That was like, there's nothing really that happens in that miniseries, and yet I have such fond memories of it.
There's all the reveals, right? Like, I guess, when Jane Badler eats the hamster.
Yeah.
That scene gave our Chihuahua nightmares.
Yeah. You realize, oh my God, the beautiful woman is really just a lizard person.
Right.
Oh my God, maybe all beautiful women are really just lizard people is what you're starting to say to yourself.
Well, you know, as a kid, I had like this obsession with creatures that looked like humans but weren't really humans. So that includes V-lizards, fembots,
drummers,
bass players.
Yes. Subhumans.
Well, thanks for tuning in, folks.
Unless you're a drummer.
Don't think we'll be topping that today.
The upside, though, most drummers don't have the capacity to actually figure out how to start a podcast and listen to it. So
they keep drooling over the keyboard.
Exactly. They're just opening the door over and over again and not understanding why it's not working. You know? Anyway, welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Brian and Scott.
Come for the podcast, stay for the comedy, stay for the drummer jokes.
That's exactly. I'm sorry, drummers. You are people, sort of, too. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you'll never have my full respect.
Hey, if they were like lizard people, that would be cool too. All right. So on today's episode, despite hysterical laughing, what are we going to talk about, man?
Today's episode, we're actually going to talk about something very serious today, which is how to approach learning guitar. If you're a guitar player, you're listening to Rock Guitar Confidential, you must probably want to learn guitar or have something to do with guitar or be enthusiastic about guitar.
Or own a guitar.
Yes, and what's interesting is that both Ryan and I have experienced many decades as instructors of guitar and performers and session musicians and, you know, you name it, songwriters, recording artists. So we've seen it from all the sides, including as a student.
Absolutely.
At one point, we were both students. Just not that we aren't students now. That's something we'll talk about later in the podcast.
Yep.
But it's like one of those things that, you know, we know what it's like to be like a 10-year-old trying to go and learn how to play guitar, and we know what that feels like, and we know what it's like to be a frustrated 14-year-old learning guitar, and we know what it's like to be a working professional in your 20s as a guitarist. So we can kind of see it from every way, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think part of the overall message here is that you never stop learning.
That's true. That's something we'll get to. Like we'll get to the last segment. We'll talk all about that, the student's mind thing. But I think the key when it comes to learning really anything, but let's just focus on guitar since this is Rock Guitar Confidential, is to try and get with a good instructor and then follow their method. And what's interesting is there's a lot of different ways to to peel an onion, if as it were. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Every instructor has their method, and I think the mistake that you can make sometimes is jumping from instructor to instructor, because that's going to mean you starting over every single time. So every whatever mortgage interest you put in the bank is gone when you go to the next instructor.
Yeah, you lose equity in the relationship. I mean, it's one thing if you just really don't click.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, if you have someone who's like maybe, and I think this happens a lot with good instructors too, because good instructors will challenge a student. When you walk in the door, it's not like, hey man, what do you want to learn today? Should we learn like that cool riff from that song? That's today's lesson. That's not your friend. That's not someone who's got your best interest in mind. That's someone who's just lazy and is looking to just get you out the door with a paycheck. That's all they care about.
Yep.
Somebody who cares about you as an instructor is going to ask you to do things that make you uncomfortable and is going to hold you accountable. And that's, what a good instructor looks like. So that's a little tricky when you're 12 because you don't necessarily know that, but you really just need to get in with somebody and follow their method. What do you think, Ryan? I want to dominate the conversation.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, and when they're asking you to do something uncomfortable, it's always musical, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not,
Could you please just hold this bag for me?
Could you just forge this check, please?
Exactly.
Yeah, right. No,
And,
nothing like that.
Can I put some boxes of some stuff in your house?
Hey, I've got some stereo speakers in my van. Could you handle these?
Just, wanted to just, come on, you're my student, man. It's all good.
No.
It's all good.
It's gonna be more like
Musically uncomfortable. Like,
it's gonna be like, hey, try playing these chord progressions.
yes. How about learn bar chords and where notes are? You know what I mean? That kind of
right.
thing. I think one thing that's tough when people start, because they have no understanding of what's good or bad or what's required of them, is that they tend to come in with the thought of sort of, I'm just going to put my fingers on 5 and then 7 and 4. I'm going to memorize what frets I go to, and they think that's playing guitar. And it's like you have to learn the notes. You have to learn the chords and understand rhythm and things like that. That's what makes you a real musician. Nobody who's a real musician says go to 7. They'll go to 5. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's just not. That's a sign of someone who does not know what they're doing. So a good musician or a good instructor is going to ask you to say, let's learn how to do it the right way. You know what I mean? So let me kind of throw out my philosophy on like what you need to know right when you start in terms of the actual material. So anybody who's not a guitar student, this is going to be the boring part of the conversation. But you definitely need to learn. I would say start off with knowing at least some understanding of the notes of the neck. You have to have a decent basic chord vocabulary. So that would include open chords, bar chords, and power chords, especially if you're a rock musician. And you have to understand rhythm and chord transitions. That's like square one for learning guitar. What do you think about that?
Well, I'll say like square 0. You need to know the names of the strings.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, names of the strings.
You have to know what the parts of the guitar are, like the nut and the frets.
That's like the welcome mat on the door to the learning guitar.
That's when I started teaching years and years ago. It didn't occur to me that a first lesson has to be those things.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think that especially people oftentimes have a very big misunderstanding of where they actually are in terms of their level too. I hear people tell me they're intermediate guitar players all the time, and then I'll say, okay, let's play a G chord, and they give me a blank stare because they don't know what that is. It's like, okay, now you're really a beginning player.
Like what constitutes intermediate? That's a good one.
Well, to me, intermediate, you have to have all the fundamental stuff under your fingers already. To me, an intermediate player knows not only understands chords and rhythm and transitions, but understands keys and scales and their relationship to keys.
Yep.
And has some degree of technique and vocabulary already built. You know what I mean? And repertoire as well. So that's what an intermediate player is. So that's someone who's probably been playing about 2 years, who's been practicing hard for 2 years. That constitutes intermediate to me.
Yep.
And then beginning student is someone who's just kind of getting rolling. Got to start learning the chords, starting to do the transitions, which is the really hard, challenging part because it's going to be a slog to get your fingers to move and understand these chord shapes, but it's got to be done. And that's all about consistency. There's not anything about I hear people say like, I'm not talented or I don't have a knack for this. I'm like, no, you're just starting.
Yeah.
It's like if you've never skied before, it doesn't mean you just suck at skiing. You just never skied.
Yeah. And you know what? I try to remind those students that, hey, music's important to you for a reason.
Yeah.
Right.
And we just got to, I also try to not have people focus on how far away from their ultimate goal they are. Just focus on the next goal in front of you.
Yep.
Get your chords down. That's all you need to focus on is that. Okay, learn your rhythms and work on transitions. That's all you need to focus on. Don't worry about, but I want to play that Animals as Leaders song. I'm like, okay, you're 10,000 miles away from that.
It's funny. I have that problem with adults more than I do with kids.
Yeah, I mean, really any student is going to have that same kind of thing. I agree with that. Adults tend to be worse for that as well. But I think the key is just don't focus on how far away you are. Just focus on the next step in front of you.
That's right.
And I think that's good advice for learning any discipline.
Enjoy the process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think whatever you're doing, if you're learning woodworking, if you're becoming a chef, all those things it's you have to focus that way. That's the key to being successful. The other key to being successful is you have to be consistent with your practicing. I think more than anything else, consistency is the most important thing. It's not about doing 6 hours a day, because even if you could do that for a short bit of time, there's no way that's sustainable. You're not going to be practicing 6 hours a day forever going forward. That's just not a good way to set your practice schedule. So try and find maybe I would say somewhere between 3 and 4 hours total for the whole week that you can practice, but with a consistent schedule and being consistent,
Right. Yeah. I'd rather have a half hour a night for 4 days a week than 2 hours all in one.
Yeah. Because by the time you get to the next week where you're doing it again, all the gains you are going to be erased by the time you get back to starting over. You need that consistency day to day, especially at the beginning, because you don't have the finger coordination built up yet. You know what I mean?
Stamina, it's a physical thing.
It is. I think what's interesting about guitar is it is a physical and a mental and a creative discipline all at the same time. So you kind of have all different aspects of your brain sort of being activated, as well as your fingers. There's kinesthetic things you have to do. I mean, there's all these different things that you have to be able to do at the same time. So for beginning students, I think that's where you want to start. And then once you get to the point where you've got like your basic chord ideas down, you can transition, you understand rhythms, you can understand how to count like a 16th note or an 8th note rhythm, those things. The next thing I would recommend is get into some kind of repertoire, meaning you want to start learning a handful of tunes, say 10, 15 songs, whatever, that songs you really like to play that'll help you with that. Get those down, learn all the parts, like learn the intros, verses, chorus, bridges, all that stuff. Learn how to play them and play them with the song so you can play the entire song top to bottom. Get those guys under your fingers. That's going to help you take what you just learned on the rhythm stuff and apply it to something that's more tangible to you. You can kind of, hey, I can play Highway to Hell from AC/DC now or whatever.
Yeah, I mean? And I think it's important that you didn't list repertoire first.
Yeah, repertoire comes after you develop some basic skills.
Yep.
That's really important. If the song approach is not really an approach, it's just a way to not learn anything.
It's a way to just take your money.
Yes, exactly. Pat you on the head and send you on your way, basically.
Right.
And it's enjoyable. It's very much the personal trainer who's like, you know what? We're not going to do this workout. Here's some Taco Bell, man. That's basically what it is.
That's an interesting workout goal. Hey,
yeah, exactly.
I really want to enjoy that Mexi melt. Exactly. I can't feel guilty.
Well, it's
don't worry.
That.
Skip the sit-ups.
Yeah, we're not going to do any cardio today.
Let's run for the border now.
I just came back from Dairy Queen, man. Here's a blizzard. I'm not going to do this running. What are you talking about? It's exactly that. That's the analogy to a guitar teacher telling you, we'll learn that Jack
Dude,
White
my trainer trains me just like Rocky, man. I ran through a blizzard the other day. It was like Rocky 4.
It was delicious.
It's the most delicious workout ever.
So you're looking at, once you get that down, then once you've kind of tackled that sort of, I've got my first handful of tunes under my belt, the next thing you want to start working on is understanding of basic harmony, which is basically what are keys. What's a 1-4-5 chord progression? How do you transition from key to key? What's a major key? What's a minor key? That kind of thing. That'd be the next step, is that. And then maybe go back to your repertoire and then rethink it in terms of the key center. So if you're looking at something like, let's say, the chorus to Pour Some Sugar on Me from Def Leppard, that's a 1-4-5 chord progression.
Right.
Now, you can learn the E5, A5, B5 and not think of it as a 1-4-5, but once you understand key centers, you want to go back and understand, okay, that is a 1-4-5.
Right.
And then you can kind of see everything you've already learned through the prism of, this is the key that I'm in. And then from that point forward, you want to think of it that way. Because in different bands you're going to play in, it's not going to be just memorize and put your fingers here. They might say, hey, you know what? This song was in E, but my singer feels way more comfortable playing this in G. So we're going to play the same thing in G. So transpose it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean? And guitars are great for transposing because the strings and the frets just create a grid.
And that's true. Well, same with, I think piano is like by far the easiest one.
But guitar is way cooler.
It is way cooler.
Yeah,
for sure.
Why are we even talking
There's
about
not, I don't know why I said that.
Dude.
Piano, the subhumans.
So really this episode is just ripping on every other instrumentalist.
Hey, they had a choice. The guitar was right there.
Hey, right.
They made a decision.
Hey, no one's sitting at the beach jamming on piano.
That's true. Maybe it is. What's that guy? What's the guy that did the Toy Story song? I can't remember his name.
Sorry, dude, you're getting into children's movies. So once again, I'm totally out.
You got a friend in me.
Okay, I believe it. Look, if it's not in like Evil Dead or The Exorcist or something, then I'm not really aware.
All right, fine. All right, so you're gonna get to that. And then there's one more stop on the beginner's train, and that's when you start learning your scales. And to my mind, you got to at least be comfortable with your pentatonic scales and understand how to visualize them across the neck, change keys, and then develop some fundamental skills like bending, vibrato, hammer-ons and pull-offs.
Some basic phrasing, basic melodic ideas.
Yep. And get those guys and know how to play them in any key.
Yep.
And then at that point, you can then get your passport stamped into intermediate guitar player territory. That to me is, yep, exactly. You are now an intermediate player. And that because you have, at that point you understand your notes of the neck, your open string names. You got all of your chord vocabulary down. You understand rhythms and counting rhythms. You got a repertoire. You understand keys and changing keys. You understand your scales.
It's important. After you get your passport stamped, you then have to go into a chamber where you're sterilized of all grunge apocalypse influence.
Yes, they'll Clockwork Orange you in a chair and make you watch nothing but this tainted angel from South Gang over and over again. And
yes, all the flannel melts
Babylon
off.
AD, hammer swings down and stuff. That just makes sure that all that. Only the finest.
Absolutely. Well, once you get to be that good at guitar,
Steel
then,
Hearts, I'll never let you go.
Absolutely. It's time to turn in your Jag Stang. You're good at guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Put the Floyd Rose on that thing. Now just in the fire.
No, just in the fire, man.
Yeah, they can't be saved. Yeah.
Into the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's calling again.
As Don Dawkins taught us.
Exactly. Well, actually, it was Don Dawkins or Jeff Pilson. I'm not sure who wrote that song.
Well, George Lynch is the most important one.
That's true. That's the most important thing.
Just sticking with the theme.
It's true. Oh my God, dude. It's funny. I was teaching one of my students something the other day. It was, I think we were working on just a chord progression. And, we're doing the Trooper from Iron Maiden.
Nice.
And they actually did a thing.
Time for pull-offs.
They did a thing with a slide on that. And I think, wait a minute. Dude, that sounded just like Kiss of Death. And then I started playing Kiss of Death from Dawkins. It starts in E, just like the Trooper. And I was like, oh my God. I literally just played through the whole thing, and then they're looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, that's Kiss of Death from Dawkins. And they're like, what?
Dude, I love the Trooper because, once you get the student up and running, playing that initial descending pull-off lick, you can like harmonize it when they're not expecting.
Yep. And then watch, what's happening? Did I make a mistake?
It's a great entree into, here's how to harmonize.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just like a barbershop quartet. All right, so
a barbershop quartet made of all eddies.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be awesome.
Let's move into intermediate territory now. What kinds of things? Now, I've took the beginner one. You go to what you think would be intermediate level. Once you got all those tools in your kit, what's intermediate level?
Well, the first thing, so you were talking about, chord progressions in key. So then, probably the next thing would be playing in like a relative minor key, right?
Well, that's kind of part of that in my mind. Like,
okay, so you're including
major,
that?
minor keys and how they relate to each other and stuff like that.
So then how about modes and modal chord progressions?
That's true. And then before that, though, I would actually add diatonic scales as well.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where the 7 modes of the major scale come from.
And that's exactly, that ties right into your modes. So once you know your diatonic scales, you can learn your modes. And you already know your key centers, so you can say, okay, I'm in this key, and if I'm doing a modal progression, I just do this chord instead. You know what I mean? And it's all right there because you already have that information built up. This, by the way, that we're describing is why you can't just teach yourself online. Because you need to have things in a certain order, like laid out for you. You have to like learn things in a certain way. Because it's like mathematics in the sense that you can't jump straight to calculus. You have to know to add and subtract, multiply, divide.
And I suck at math, so I'll take your word for it.
But you know what I mean. But you have to have certain skills there to develop the next set of skills. Because everything builds on the thing you learned before.
Yep. Well, and here's where the consistency comes in too. And I'm going to add the consistency of the guitar lesson. Mm-hmm. Right. So I've got a student right now where we're talking about, melody versus harmony, right? So if
these are strippers you're talking about. These are strippers' names you're talking about?
Yes, Melody, Harmony, and Mercedes. We're in the Motley Crue chapter. Yeah.
Oh, man. Melody and Harmony. Oh, man. That's all I had.
I got introduced to them from by Lexus and Mercedes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
totally.
Sorry, I was not trying to mess you off.
No, not at all.
I had to throw you off your game, man. My bad.
Hey, that's okay. This is a fun. We're having a fun episode today.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I like it. See what happy people we are, folks. You want to take guitar lessons from people who like to laugh as much as we do, and that's the truth.
And genuinely love music too.
Right. We could talk about this all day.
Yeah, exactly. And do.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And here we are. Boy, so we were talking. Where was I? We were talking about modes.
So, what would be the intermediate level? So I think adding diatonic scales to the mix would be the next thing.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And then understanding its relationship to major and minor and the modes. And then, as you said, modal chord progressions.
Modal chord progressions, and your relative minor key is a great place to start, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, that kind of something you probably got in the late beginner section, that whole thing, and then
just kind of like pivoting off of that though. So, like for example, if you're playing, A minor, F, and G, right? It wouldn't be like so accurate. I mean, it would be technically accurate to call that like a 1-6. Well, I'm sorry, not a 1-6-7, but like a 6-4-5 in the key of C.
Yeah,
it would be more accurate.
You could think of the A minor as the 1 chord, or you could think of that as the 6 chord.
Right, right. So thinking about that as like a minor 1, flat 6, flat 7 in A minor.
Yeah.
I think that paves the way for understanding modal chord progressions because Aeolian is a mode,
Yeah.
natural minor.
Minor is a mode. Yeah.
Right.
We tend to elevate it like it's like the yin to major's yang, but it's really just another mode. It's like a glorified Phrygian.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And for all of our listeners, mode is kind of a glorified word for scale.
Yeah. And a chord built off that scale. Chords built off
Yeah.
that scale. So that's the next thing, though. And then to me, what I would always recommend that people get into at that point is start learning arpeggios and understand how to play arpeggios, outlining chords or playing them diatonically to the key. That would be the next thing. So learn how to do that. Now, depending if you're a guitar shredder or not, you might want to get into sweep picking arpeggios. If not, then just learn arpeggios and how to play them melodically, both diatonically and then outlining chords.
And diatonic just means natural to the key, folks. You're
Stay in the key
you're
of C, stay in the key of A minor. Or whatever
which
it
means
might be.
you're staying in the C major scale
If
or
you're-
the A
if you're in
minor
the C
scale,
major
which is the
scale,
same thing. Yeah, right.
Exactly. But take that and transpose it to D or whatever, any other key. It's the same concept. And that gives you a chance to practice your arpeggios. You can do all of them and, across the neck in the key, and you'll know the key and you'll understand all the arpeggios. You get a chance to practice all
And the
those guys.
intervals and all of those arpeggios. And
Then, usually when I'm teaching a student in that point, I will usually go through chord theory before we jump into arpeggios. So they
course.
understand, like, okay, this is the major third, I'm flatting it to make it minor, that kind of thing. And they'll have all that understanding. And what's interesting, and this is something that we guitar teachers are probably asking a lot from students, is that, you guys need to have patience enough to understand that we know where we're taking you, and it's the reason I'm asking you to learn this now, and why we're not just jumping straight to those awesome sweep arpeggio ideas.
Oh, totally.
You got to just trust. We need to know this first. I wouldn't ask you to do it if you didn't need to know it.
Well, and
It's like-
getting back to what I was saying earlier, I've got a student who I'm talking about like melody versus harmony, right? So if the melody note is E, well, then there's, 3 major triads E can be found in, 3 minor, 3 diminished, and 3 augmented triads that E can be found in, right? So, and then there's a project where you've got to actually write all that down, right? And, the consistency also comes from the lesson every week, right? Like, I don't expect really any student to completely nail that project the first time.
Oh yeah.
My
Or even
expectation.
second or third time, just give it an effort. It's,
Yeah, totally. So
yeah.
I tell everybody, you got to use pencil, come back, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where you're going wrong with your thought process. This is where you're going right. You know what I mean? And
that's totally normal, right?
I always tell them too, like, dude,
yeah.
don't expect this by next week either. It's going to be like a few
Yeah.
months before this really sinks in. But we want to start that process now.
That's
You know
right.
what I
It's a
mean?
process of this ongoing conversation with your
Yeah.
instructor.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why another thing you can't just do on your own online. You can't, like, there's no that. There's lessons that will show you chord theory, but without somebody to explain to you, this is what we're doing, this is how it changes, this is how you apply this, it really doesn't help. Thank you for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott. Please make sure to rate, subscribe, and review this podcast. Now back to the show. And the thing is, I think that in my experience with other instructors that I know, it feels like what you and I are doing is kind of rare in a lot of ways. I don't feel like there's a lot of these kind of conversations or game plans going on for students. A lot of it's just like, hey, man, what do you want to learn today? With a lot of students. A lot
Or
of teachers,
let's get you to, mechanically play this song-like thing, and then we're going to throw you up on stage.
Yeah, exactly. Because now you are getting a band experience, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's
You learn to work together while
Yeah.
sounding terrible.
yeah, exactly. And without any understanding or knowledge, that's going to be able something to take it forward with you, which is
Yeah,
drives me
I still
nuts.
don't know how that can be healthy for
It
the
isn't.
kid.
It really comes down to them taking advantage of the ignorance of people who think that is what actually being a musician is. You know what I mean?
It's like fantasy stuff.
Yeah, but even like less. It'd be almost like if they took you to a baseball camp and they never showed you how to hit or field and just said, "Hey, just run the bases. Isn't this great?"
Maybe it's an excuse for the parents to get together and have a glass of wine.
Maybe, or they think
I don't
that.
know.
Well, I mean, it comes down to they just don't know. You know what I mean? A lot of times the parents don't know what that is because they don't have anyone to explain it to them. And I mean, I've had conversations with the parents when I've explained this to them, and they look at me as completely mystified. Like, yeah, that's not learning music at all. You know what I mean? And
And it's going to be tough for parents. I often think back to how my parents must have felt because they aren't really musical people.
yeah, if you don't have any idea, then you just trust in whoever is in front of you. You know
It must have been so foreign. I mean, luckily, all the guys at Guitar Player Music totally took me in and had my best interest at heart.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. If you don't have anybody in your family who's musical, or let's put it this way, maybe they're musical, but they're coming from a band orchestra sort of background, which is not at all related to rock and roll. You know what
Yeah,
I
and that's a
mean?
whole different thing too. That's more. I feel it's great. Basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my B&O students are they learn how to sight read, which is great. but like from a creative standpoint, like the notion of creating their own music and then
Well, the argument there is like, do you have any intention of creating their own music? Is that something they even want to do? You know what I mean? Because you and I, it's very easy to be biased as an instructor because what's important to you, you kind of push. It's almost like being a parent in a way. Like you push, what's important to me is going to be important to you, kid. And sometimes they don't care about that part of it. But I always look at like, okay, like would I feel okay with myself if this person came back in 10 years from now and they just learned how to play these 3 riffs from me and that's all they wanted?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
agreed.
And at some point it gets to this stage with a student where it's like, okay, if I don't give them something to make them excited about playing guitar, they're just going to stop playing. So you have a sort of you got to give them something to kind of keep them interested. You can't just beat them over the head and say, no, you're going to learn this. And I don't care if you quit. Then that's not really, everyone loses in that scenario.
Right.
But you have to try and come back around to that again when they're more receptive to that message. You know
yeah,
what
well,
I mean?
and I think part of being a good instructor is, you know, because I mean, there are going to be those students that are just like, I need to learn a song,
Yep.
right? And it could be something simple. It could be Smoke on the Water.
Yep.
It could be a whole variety of things that are very simple. It doesn't have to be, you know, it could be something that they're listening to that I've never heard of.
Yeah, if you're very, very unfortunate, it's going to be Seven Nation Army. That's like,
you know what?
you just jump out a window. The nearest window towards you, jump out that window and embrace the sweet embrace of death.
Like I know. I mean, I must have shown someone how to play that in my life. Like I wouldn't bet money on I haven't because I teach guitar full time for a living. But I don't remember. So I think
I can tell you
brain's blocked
so
it
many
out.
times where I've given a student an assignment like, okay, learn all 5 patterns of your pentatonic scale and play them in the key of C major. And they come back and they go, hey, how'd the practicing go? And they go, oh man, I learned something awesome. Check this out. Ba, 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 ba. Like, okay, did you practice your scales like I asked you to do? You know, it's like, that doesn't mean anything that you can play that riff. You know what I mean? It's
I think it's important that students know that the time that you spend practicing is different than the time that you spend just kind of jamming on your guitar.
Which
now,
both are important.
Both are important,
yeah.
right? They're just not the same.
Yeah, that's not practicing.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you basically got nothing done this week is what you're telling me. That's you know, another week in the garbage can that we have to start over again and try again.
Yeah, that's tough.
And that nuance of, I'm not saying you can't play that riff to the White Stripes song. That's fine.
Great.
That's just not practicing. Practicing is working on what I asked you to practice. You need to do both. You need to work on the things you need to work on, and you can, you know, have fun after you do your 30 minutes. Go jam on that riff 100 times.
Perfect case in point, right? If you hadn't ever encountered, say, like a chromatic scale, right, you might end up playing Seven Nation Army with just one finger.
Yep.
Right.
Which it seems like people, they have this, no one understands you can use more than one finger. I'm not sure why that,
right. You
why
could
that
use,
memo got going
if
around.
you have 4 fingers, you could use all 4 of them.
If you're Django Reinhardt, you can use 2.
That's right. And you can and be a legend.
Yep, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. He is legend. It's true.
True.
But I don't know. I keep looking at that part of it. I think you got to keep people on the straight and narrow. I think intermediate is where people can start getting more frustrated, it seems to me, because they feel like they've been doing it long enough that they should be. I always hear like, I should be better. I should be further along than I am right now.
Well, you know, first let's define what better is.
Exactly, dude. You're never going to be done. I have this conversation with people all the time. Like, you will never be done. This mountain you're walking over that you think's the end. No, that's just the precipice to the next 6 mountain ranges you don't even know exist yet.
Right.
You know what I mean? And this is a lifelong thing. You're never going to be done.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
the more you learn, the more you see how much there is to learn.
Yeah, how
and
much
that
you don't
never
know.
ends.
Yep, exactly. No matter how much you know, there's always way more you don't know than you know.
That's right. And there's always another approach or something. We were talking earlier. I'm adding another method to my teaching curriculum.
Yep, exactly. So I think that when you're an intermediate player, I think you just need to sort of like trust your process, if that makes sense. And the last thing I will ask my students when they're at their intermediate level is going to be learn double stops, basically diatonic thirds, sixths, fifths, and how to play them in every key. Stuff that you'll hear a lot in like blues songs, a lot of like pop alternative stuff, some funk music as well.
Yeah, like root 6 phrases.
Yep.
And
thirds, sixths, fifths,
Yep.
and how to play octaves and drones and things like that. I'll ask them to learn those too. So if you look at what's in your bag at that point when you're in late intermediate, you should have a good understanding of chords and rhythm. You should understand harmony, including how it relates to the major and minor key, as well as all of your modes. You should have your pentatonic and diatonic scales in every key with a lot of vocabulary and technique built up. You should understand how that relates to the modes as well. You should have all of your arpeggios diatonically, basically triad arpeggios at this point, diatonically, and then understand your double stops, thirds, sixths, fifths, and octaves and drones in every key. So that's quite a huge bag of tricks right there, even at late
quite a few.
intermediate. To me, that's later intermediate. and you're starting to get to the point where you're able to apply most of those tools too, because you've got them down well enough because you've been practicing.
Well, yeah, and when you start getting through all that, so when you're talking about double stops, third, sixth, fifths, and all that, just in terms of knowing where every interval is surrounding a root note,
Yep.
right? Like
But
a
being
low
able
E
to
string
visualize
root,
it
an A string
melodically
root,
and
a D.
harmonically and stuff, and,
Yeah.
and use it like if you listen to like Brown Eyed Girl from Van Morrison.
I try not to.
Yeah, but that's an example of something people have heard. The intro to Wanted Dead or Alive from Bon Jovi, that's sixths.
Okay,
You
yep,
know what I
that's
mean?
a good one too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've told you about my issue with Brown Eyed Girl, right?
I didn't. I don't know your Brown
Oh, so when I graduated high school, my buddy's dad sent us on a Caribbean cruise.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty
Oh,
cool.
dude, it was awesome,
Yeah.
man. The legend goes after we got home, my buddy's dad showed up on my parents' doorstep with my $600 bar tab.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we signed affidavits saying that we were old enough to. I mean, we're on international waters, right? But we graduated high school at 17, not 18.
Oh wow.
So we just signed affidavits saying we were 18, and then it was just off to the bar. We booked a bunch of trips on the island, but just like slept through them hungover.
Oh my god.
So we,
But of course, that never made it back to your parents or their parents, right?
no, actually, I think it was all on the. I think we just got a pass. It was
okay,
like,
okay.
you made it through high school, whatever.
You can go be
Right, you can just go.
knucklehead for however long you need.
Yeah,
to
go hundreds of miles away and be a knucklehead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was
Come back alive. I've done my job.
right. Now, of course, I didn't cease being a knucklehead when I got back home. The train kept rolling there for a while, but
As it often does. Yeah.
as it often does. But anyway, so there was a dance. There's bands and dance clubs and stuff, right? So the reggae band on board was great.
Ah, cool.
They played like the same 8-song set
Of course.
every day.
That's what
for
we
a
want to
week.
hear. You know.
Yeah, totally. But so anyway, so there was a DJ that took requests.
Like, play King Diamond.
Dude, I wish.
Yeah. I
And
want you to play
as it just so
Halloween by King
happens,
Diamond. Yeah.
dude, again, that would be great. Well, I mean, there's the rock cruise for you.
That's true.
That might happen.
Watch the bands for when Halloween breaks out. That'd be awesome.
Ah, dude, why isn't there like a Halloween metal cruise?
That'd
That would be
awesome.
so great.
Seems like an obvious thing, but
I'd buy the ticket right now.
I'm sure there's
Dude,
probably
just
is
horror
one.
movies and like black metal bands all day.
Yeah, it sounds like Norwegian bands would be all over that for sure.
They'd all be like lost on the subdecks,
Exactly.
like wandering around.
Yes, well, they're Vikings. They know how to find their way. Come on. So anyway, let's get back on track.
Okay, so on this, I'll finish the story real quick.
Okay,
so
okay.
on this cruise, there was a girl who had brown eyes.
She was the proverbial brown-eyed girl.
Yes, and she wasn't shy about making song requests with the DJ at the
Okay.
club on the ship.
Okay.
She only had one song to request
And so you guys heard this
multiple
song?
times a night.
Oh my God.
I never want to hear that song again.
That still scars
Ever.
you to this day.
It's just on the list of songs I need to never hear again.
Well, anyway, I'm trying to think of songs that people have heard that use double stop.
Oh no, I'm just throwing that in there. So just in case if my skin turns green. yeah.
You were an alien this whole time. God damn it.
There's definitely, maybe an episode in the future, like songs that we wouldn't initially hate, but never need to hear again.
I hear that. I hear
Right?
that for
Separate
sure.
from all the grunge apocalypse stuff. Just
That's
other
just-
songs that I've like
there's so much
enough. I've had
trauma.
enough.
So much trauma from the grunge apocalypse. I mean, there's all those songs. I don't have to
Right.
hear.
But these are songs outside of that aren't bad songs that I wouldn't otherwise dislike, but I've had enough. I'm full.
All right, we'll get to that podcast.
Yes.
That sounds like an awesome podcast.
All right, cool.
But okay, so at this point you're in intermediate land. You got all these tools under your belt. You've been practicing. Maybe you got some cool gear. Got an awesome guitar. Got a cool amp. You're starting to get pedals and starting to understand how like reverbs work and delay pedals and effects
Yeah,
loops
pedals,
and all that
yeah.
stuff. And well, you're starting to kind of walk up the line. We're getting into it.
Right.
And then that brings you to the doorstep of advanced guitar. So advanced guitar level to me is where you start adding a few more like layers to it. So the one thing I would say would be working on things like various forms of tapping, like two-handed tapping, whether it be pentatonic or diatonic, how tapping works with arpeggios.
Meaning using one of the fingers on your picking hand to fret a note.
Everybody knows what tapping is. You've seen Van
I'm just
Halen.
making sure, man. Just
If you don't, then you're
just
dead to me.
details. Just details. I'm just making sure because there's that listener out there.
Yeah.
That's a brand new guitar player.
Okay.
They need to know these things.
That's fair. But I'm talking about advanced guitar part of land.
Yeah,
and
I
then
know,
we're going to start getting into like some very complex sweep picking, some multi-octave triad arpeggios and seventh chord arpeggios that cover the entire neck. Starting to work work on things like odd grouping sequences. Like
Ooh, odd note groupings are fun.
yeah, and then working on things like advanced scales, like starting to get into harmonic minor and nth modes and melodic minor and nth modes and the symmetrical scales. And things
Hungarian minor.
Yeah, double harmonic major, Hungarian minor. Yeah,
The whole
that
tone
kind of
scale.
thing. Exactly. And then learning, once you get the very bleeding edge, when you have all that stuff down, once you totally understand how to rock a Locrian natural 2 scale, then you're going to be able to go in there and do something like, okay, I'm going to do a synthetic pentatonic or hexatonic scale and how to build those guys. Then that, at that point you have almost a massive array of tools in your toolkit for which to spell to spell doom for your enemies.
Yeah. I love it. Keep going. Keep going. Yes.
Then the next demon to slay is going to be the harmony. Like understand how to play over more complex harmony. So not only just changing keys, but understand how to play through changes and understand how to play over each chord individually, kind of a la jazz fusion player. And to me, there's a value in that, even if you're a rock and metal guy, to understand how to do that, because rock and metal is pretty much it's very limited in terms of the harmonic construction for the most part, especially for most traditional rock. It's just root fifth or even octaves or single notes. So you really can almost create the harmony. And if you have an understanding of how to play over chord harmony, you can imply harmony that isn't there and make it more complex, which is really interesting. Now, this is something that you want to get to the point where you're probably 4 or 5 years, probably really hardcore playing guitar. That's when you want to start doing that. And at that point, you really need to be thinking about either writing your own music or joining a band and going out and performing, because there's a kind of learning you can only do when you're playing with other people.
Right. Playing with other people when you're ready to contribute to a band situation.
Yep. So
right. So this isn't like I just started playing guitar and now in 5 weeks we're going to have you on stage.
I kind of look at it like this. Like at this point, I've been your mama wolf, taking you around and showing you how to hunt, but now you need to go hunt for yourself. Does that make sense? That's when you get to that spot. You need to go out and learn.
I've been your mama wolf. Now I'm going to leave you alone in the woods.
And you're going to learn to survive because I've trained you. You know what I mean? And you have to figure out how you're going to do this, because this is how I do it. But now you got the tools. You figure out how you do it. You know what I mean? And that's sort of, to me, that's when we get to the point where if I'm still instructing someone at that point where they've got that stuff under their fingers, then it's just me trying to really put them through the paces and saying, okay, let's get these things down, apply these things right now, do it now. Let's
do it now.
Do it now.
Do it. Yeah.
Don't go to the chopper.
I thought it was get to the chopper.
No, don't go to the chopper. I need your payment every month.
Pay the pilot of the chopper.
No, but
Venmo the chopper.
Exactly. Where's your PayPal? You have not sent it. That was actually more of a German thing. I didn't know it's an Austrian.
Right. I was thinking Predator.
Yeah. Okay, that worked.
Yep.
So anyway, that's to me like sort of the life cycle of guitar lessons right there. You know what I mean? And then once you get to that point where you're at that advanced stage, then to me YouTube becomes a great tool, because then you can go in there and if someone's got some wacky thing you've never seen before, you'll have all the background you need to understand what they're doing and how it applies to what you do.
Right.
You know
You can understand, well, because you've been taking lessons from someone who's speaking the language of music with you on a weekly basis.
So you'll see that and you'll recognize what that is and where it fits in. And you're like, oh, what a cool take on this. And you're not going to be blown away. Like, I don't understand. When you said I'm going to a minor triad arpeggio, what does that mean? You're going to totally know what that means. You know what I mean? It's not going to blow your mind at all. So, but that's a process. And as I've described and we described as we're talking about this, is a multi-year process. It's not going to be something that's a short-term sort of thing. I think the key is stay on task, stay on your sort of like plan and be consistent. And then take joy in the little victories along the way. I think that's the key.
Oh, absolutely. When you're able to think through those concepts more quickly, right?
Yeah, I use the analogy of language all the time. It's like when you learn Spanish or French or something, like, when you're first doing it, it's like you just learn the words and then it's very stilted and you kind of don't sound like a native speaker. But once you get more and more fluent with it, you become able to just think in that language. You don't actually have to interface with it like, oh, wait, what's the masculine pronoun for this? It's like you just think in that language.
Right. I mean, for a lot, it's, for some students, it's, in the beginning, it's tough just to count through the alphabet backwards.
Yeah, it's true.
Right. But then but you just keep doing it and you start thinking in a different way.
Yeah, that's why the consistency is underrated. It's so important to just do it consistently. Practicing is everything. Now, when I was learning, I just didn't have patience, so I practiced like unbelievable amount of time per day. I probably practiced when I was a teenager. I probably practiced 5 to 6 hours a day every day. And then when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I practiced like, no joke, between 10 and 14 hours a day every day.
That's awesome.
So it's one of those things where I would like sit there and I would just practice like all day and then play. I was teaching lessons too the time I wasn't practicing. So I'd be like practice from 7 a.m. to like 2 in the afternoon straight.
Yeah.
Then go teach lessons, then go to the band rehearsal or come home and practice another 3 hours.
Yeah, you're eating it, sleeping it, and breathing it. Yeah.
That's all I did. If I wasn't eating or sleeping, I was playing guitar. That was it. You know what I mean? And that's that. that wasn't necessarily the most balanced life to have. They're basically doing one thing all the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the patience to say, hey, this is going to be 3 years. Like, no, I'm getting this right. And I'm going to learn these sequencing ideas in every key this week. God damn it. Have them down. And
it's, you've got to, shoot for the stars, man.
well, you have to have the discipline and the sort of chutzpah to just do that and say, I don't care how much work it takes. You know what I mean?
Hey, passion always gets better results than discipline.
Exactly right. And what's funny is you're absolutely right, because it wasn't like I had to sit there and like, oh man, I got to put it on my board. I got to go practice. Like I was like, fuck, I can't wait to practice.
Right.
I get my coffee. I'm gonna go practice right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
that's the thing is, I've probably said on this podcast, I used to fall asleep next to my guitar when I was a kid, and Mom had to wake me up to put my jammies on.
Me too.
You know,
Yep.
it's I don't.
That
So as
kind
a
of thing
teacher,
is-
that can be tough because people can still get something out of the music lesson who aren't as obsessed as maybe we were.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that was for me a process as an instructor to like learn that not everyone wants to be the greatest guitar player in the world. Like I couldn't understand. Well, why would you pick up the guitar if you don't want to be the greatest guitar player?
Right.
Live?
Yeah,
And
I
that's
get that.
why you
Yep.
play. It's like Steve Vai. Well, we gotta be that. It's not going to happen by practicing in 2 hours a week. Come on, man. It's like the idea, but I want to play Green Day songs. Like no, this is Passion and Warfare by Steve Vai. Check this. Like here's Ingrid Malmsteen's Far Beyond the Sun. We're going to learn
Right.
these arpeggios. It's like but that's
Today's topic: Joe Stump.
yeah, exactly. Or we're gonna do Kristen Pelletieri songs or something.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah,
Yes.
but it's like you're not that guy. There's some people who are just singer songwriter, strum guitar guy.
Yep.
That being said, I always tell them like, look, I know that this is where you're coming from. I'm not going to force you to learn like the super advanced stuff because it's not going to serve you for what you want to do. But you can't be completely ignorant of technique or theory either.
Yeah, or harmony.
It's going to leave you with all these gaps. You need to know that stuff too, and you have to have some degree of scale, technique, and understanding, or else you're going to be extremely limited as a player.
Right, or if you're going to be writing this song and you're going to want to know what some other options could be.
You're only limiting what your imagination can do if you don't learn more.
Bingo.
That's basically what it comes down to. And so, we've said this before, you don't know what you don't know. And you have to understand that, the less you understand, the less you're capable of doing, the less creative you can be.
Yeah, learning more does not stifle your creativity.
Yep. It just means that you have more options to express that creativity.
That's right.
And more capacity to do it right away. It's almost like, I think it's an analogy on the podcast before, like if you're trying to drive to New York, you can either just start driving and maybe you'll get there. Or you can get the GPS directions and just go straight there. You know what I mean? Like if I have this idea and I hear in my head, I'm like, oh, that's Phrygian. You can just play it. You don't have to
once
sit
you
there
get
and-
used to what Phrygian sounds like, you need to know all the theory underneath it.
But you can just do it
But-
right now. You don't have to
Yeah.
sit there and hunt and peck for 2-3 days to find those things. You can just do it right away. You know what I mean? And then you already know what the chords are that outline that, how to extend those chords out, what scales relate to that. It just opens up it just blossoms. They have all these ideas you can do, and you don't have to do any of them or all of them. You can do whatever you feel like you need to do, but they're going to be right at your fingertips.
That's right.
When you're doing it, rather than sort of like, oh gosh. And I think, sometimes people, when they get frustrated, they use this sort of the excuse like, well, I'm not going to use this, or I don't need to know this, or that kind
Well,
of
you
thing.
don't know that.
Exactly. They don't know that. And nobody knows that. And I think you need to sort of know yourself well enough to know when you're making excuses for why you're not practicing and stuff. And this is just very human stuff that everyone does when, for us, it's baffling because why would you do anything except for be the best guitar player you can possibly be? There's no other thing you should be doing.
Well, it's when I was learning, how to use recording software, I never said I don't need to learn how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But when you're learning how to do calculus or algebra, you're like, so I really need to know this. And I think the idea of someone applying that mindset to like learning how to play guitar is so baffling to me. It's like, but this is playing guitar. This is like the coolest thing you could possibly be doing.
Yeah, it's definitely emotionally different.
It's weird to think that you would see this as like a calculus class or something like that. That's really strange to me that kind of have that attitude. But some people do, and I think that comes down to, some people have a drive to be like a great musician, and some people don't. And if you don't, you can still be good and creative and make good music that's valid, but you probably aren't going to ever achieve what you could with it that maybe other people might if you don't have that passion and drive. Because I can't give that passion and drive to you. You have to have it or you don't. You know what I mean?
And it's cool to just to know that you're going to be capable of stuff you never even dreamed of if you just stay on the path.
It's true. And you'll be open to understanding other artists that maybe you wouldn't typically listen to or anything.
Right.
There's like so many advantages to doing that the way we're describing, and there's so many disadvantages to not doing it and pitfalls. And I see a lot of students who get very frustrated, and I always tell them like, look, you just got to look at the next stone in front of you. Don't look down. Don't look at the top of the mountain. Look at the stone in front of your foot, and step on that stone, and then step on the next stone.
That's right.
That's all
man.
you got to do. You know what I mean? And that's the key to success. If you do
And
that,
it doesn't matter what stone that is, whether it's Keith or Mick.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, just step
on them
on
all.
it.
Yep, exactly. And then listen to a better band like The Who.
Choose to that. Right on.
All right. So anyway, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up. But any
think
other
so.
thoughts?
No, I mean, I think that that bundles things up nicely.
Nice.
Indeed. So I'll give you a full review after I receive Chord Chemistry by Ted Green this week.
Nice. You guys have that to look forward to. The famous Chord Chemistry by Ted Green.
That's right. John Petrucci recommended it. And so, just goes to show that even us instructors are adding to our curriculums. And
That's actually something I think is important to kind of leave the final thought is that, I think no matter how much you know or how much you think you know, you need to always have what they call a student's mind.
Yep.
And just recognizing that you have incomplete knowledge, that no matter what you know is always going to be added to for the rest of your life. There's never an end point in the learning process. You're always going to be a student as long as you live of music. And that's something that I think I look at it as very inspiring. I'm not bummed by that. It's like, that's great. I have endless potential to get better.
yeah, for you gamers out there, you're adding experience points. And you're
Picking up health bundles off the ground. And
yeah,
stuff,
totally. You're boosting up attributes. Yeah. And that's always fun. I mean, there's a whole industry built around gaming and that kind of thing. So just, do it for yourself.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Who else are you going to do it for, really, at the end of the day?
That's right. You're living your own RPG. Upgrade your time to get to the next level.
There you go. I don't understand any of what you just said right now. I got to let you know.
That's all right, dude. I've got some
leaving me.
gameplay footage of me killing people with a knife. It's a really good one, too, because on voice chat, they were like, So I got to... on my little
So
online
you got a
game
chance
I
to
play...
virtually murder somebody.
Well, yeah, I virtually murdered them, but they were on the voice chat, so I got the actual human, but they're all, get the bounty, and I stabbed him with a knife. Seriously, I will show you, it's the best.
Oh, God. Okay, we'll wrap up there. So, guys, we do
Awesome.
have some website information. So if you guys want to know anything more about Ryan and I and what we're doing, or our band, X Aegis, you can please check out our website at www.xaegisband.com. You can also reach us on Twitter at twitter.com/xaegisband. Facebook is facebook.com/X, you guessed it, xaegisband.
Right.
And then Instagram.com, xaegisband.
That's right. That's X Aegis, spelled EXAEGIS.
BAND.
Got it.
And you can reach us there for all updates on what we're doing with the band and also with this podcast right here. Thank you for listening to Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast. You guys are so appreciated.
Peace.
Bye.